Miss Martin Muses and another Civil War discussion. Yes, it is precious. It is today on March the 9th, the 162nd anniversary of the battle of between the Monitor and the Merrimack, sometimes called the Battle of Hampton.
Hampton Roads.
Hampton Roads. Thank you. Yes, but I guess the Yankee in me says Monitor Merrimack, and Dadmanwalking will walk us through some of the other aspects of the USS Virginia. But I'm really excited. Did I say it wrong?
No, you're fine. No, you're right. The
I said it
CSS
wrong.
Virginia. No,
I said the USS. Oops.
well, it's a CSS Virginia, but hey, it's all good. You said Virginia, though. That's cool.
Yeah, at least I got the Virginia right. That must have been a Freudian slip or something. It's like, yeah, that's what the whole Civil War was about, people. Sorry about that.
We take our locations seriously, too. So sometimes.
I know you do, and I've already messed up twice, but ooh, yeah. Well, that's almost as bad as when people call Southerners Yankees, because, and you go over to Europe, and often to them, a Yankee or a Yank, that means an American.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, no, not necessarily. I have some grandparents that would take great exception to that from Tennessee, but I digress. Well, it's great to have you back here today, Dadmanwalking55.
It is always an honor and a pleasure. It's great to see you come to our chats, but it's even more of an honor when you invite me on to talk about anything you want to talk about. Mm-hmm. I appreciate it, as always.
Yeah. Well, I'm just so happy to have another Civil War historian.
I know your passion and excitement about this and really anything you talk about is really incredible. So we need more of that.
Well, I try. It doesn't take a lot to get me excited, though. But
well, my wife's
I know what you mean, though.
My wife's always happy when I run into somebody else as excited as I am to talk about certain stuff. So,
well, for sure. Well, understand, for me, my fascination with the Civil War started very, very young. What happened was there was a TV show called The Blue and the Gray, a miniseries that was really popular. I was probably too young to be watching that, even though it's a relatively tame telling of the Civil War, but it was a really big deal. So I would talk about that with my folks. And then the North and South miniseries came out, which was huge. And even though it's a big, huge soap opera, behind the soap opera, it really accurately tells how the Civil War happened between these two fictional characters from the class of 44 in West Point. One from the North, one from the South, two wealthy people. So it does a great job of showing the lead up to the Civil War. And from then on, I was hooked.
And it took the time to actually not treat the Civil War as an afterthought or as just a side, just as in glancing passing looks. It actually incorporated it into the show, and it really it enticed those that like the history part of it, not just the television drama standpoint, which is good. And then, of course, later on in the late 80s, we had the Ken Burns documentary that actually helped resurrect a lot of life and a lot of excitement into the Civil War and things.
Oh, yeah, that was huge. And I would say it also revolutionized the documentary as a viable ratings blockbuster.
Well, if you go back and watch that again, some of the historians they had in it are just legends. Ed Bears, Shelby Foote. Yeah, exactly. Just and if you watch, I've seen some of these historians actually did some work at some of these battlefields around the country, and it's really just interesting. It's really cool to see the passion and there's so much to learn from the history. And like I've always said too, get out and go see some of these sites in person. I mean. You will get a new appreciation for the hardships and for what happened in many of the things that they went through. And you can also see how lessons repeat themselves nowadays. You sit there and you're wondering like, well, why are they doing this? You can sit there and look at it. But then again, nowadays we still have the same things to recur with,
Yep, we're still arguing about what we were arguing about at the time of the Civil War.
Yes, we are.
Yes. And I was going to say, you mentioned the Ken Burns series, also Glory. That made a huge impact on me. The 1989 movie, then Gettysburg hit. That was humongous. That was so much fun.
Yes, it was, and it was the first movie that I ever went to that actually had a legitimate intermission. But you needed it at that point with that movie. But you know what? And then what's so cool with that though is what's the fun part of that is you appreciate it that they gave us that, but it also now you get to be the nerd or geek, whichever way you want to call it, debate side of the historians because it's like, well, is that accurate? Is that accurate? No, that's you start nitpicking like where artistic license occurred or what
Mm-hmm.
was really true, what would have happened.
Yeah, there was a lot of controversy and debate about the depiction of Robert E. Lee as being confused in that
Mm-hmm.
movie. And it's like, no, he wasn't. I would agree with that. I believe though the whole planet agrees that the portrayal of Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain in the Battle of Little Round Top, the portion of it was pretty
There
darn accurate.
about the Lee thing. I know some people that actually in Gods and Generals, which was came out after that, that
Mhm,
focused more on Stonewall Jackson though. I think Robert Duvall played Robert E. Lee, and I know
mhm.
a lot of people said he made a better Robert E. Lee than they thought Martin Sheen did,
Yeah.
and they did have that thing about the confusion. From what I've read, I think I I agree. I don't. He probably was confused, but the way it was played in that movie was almost like somebody that didn't have a clue of reality. I'm sure.
Yeah, borderline senility, and I think
Right.
that's the difference, because we know that he was uncertain because he was for the first time going into a big battle without, as he called his right hand, Stonewall
Mhm.
Jackson.
Well, and also the bigger thing with Gettysburg, also remember is he detached the God, and now I get drawn a blank on the fame the cavalry. Jeb Stuart.
Yeah,
Jeb
oh,
Stuart was not with the army. Jeb Stuart was allowed to go off and go north. And normally back then, your infantry, your cavalry were your feelers. They were your intel gatherers and stuff. The
mhm,
whole thing of the movie brought out that I had not known at that point was that the actor Harrison was a real life character that Longstreet had gotten to spy for them. And you got a spy reconnoitering, finding your enemy, like following you close, but you haven't heard from your own main cavalry, who was very effective, a really important part of your forces, and they're off somewhere you don't know. So there would be confusion. You would
yep,
have some, but the way it was acted, I think the looks, the things we saw, it did give or it implied that senility, which was wrong, and they probably should have changed that or had him a little less acting on that because it was not. I mean, yeah, was he confused? They were all uncertain because they didn't have their intel out there, and of
mhm.
course, then we see Stewart arrives on day three before day three, but at that point, writing's on the wall. What happened with their um, there was also one other thing with that movie that I saw, and I don't know if you know about it. Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain is a big factor in that, also in Gods in General. And I loved that the casting of Daniels as Chamberlain, but Chamberlain had one of the most bizarre, life-threatening war wounds that you would ever hear of because he got shot, it hit his groin, and actually ricocheted. And they had to do a lot of reconstructive. They actually thought he was going to die. If it wasn't for his brother demanding and pushing around, he finally found a surgeon that actually said, "Okay, I'll try it." And of course, he struggled with a lot of stuff till the day he died. But it was interesting to see with that. And one of the other things is his uh, major, the other guy that took the other wing, and I'm drawing the blank right now in the movie
Mhm.
apparently they had a little bit of a falling out after the war. That he was thinking that Chamberlain was grandstanding some, like embellishing the actions and stuff. So it's worth to read and look into sometime though.
Yeah, I recall that. Well, he was the one that took the right wheel,
Right?
and, gosh, Captain, oh, I forget his name. He always had the pipe. I think I made
Yeah.
the same mistake the last time we were talking about it. Uh, eh, but yeah, and of course, Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain became a politician too. There's all sorts of stuff. And that's what makes this history so incredibly amazing, because Ellis Spear. That's who you're thinking of.
Yes,
Captain
exactly.
Spear.
Ellis. Yes,
Ellis
yes.
Spear. Yeah.
Yep.
And just many, many great things. Hello,
Mhm.
Shane Nolan, all the way from across the pond. Thank you for
Hello.
being here. But what is, of course, amazing and what we're talking about for the anniversary today is the Monitor versus the Merrimack. And this was what could argue the birth of modern warships as we
Mhm.
know them.
Yeah, and Corey makes a very good point here with this, is that
Mhm.
it was not, there were ironclads that existed, especially in England and France. They were starting to build iron ships. A lot of them still had sailing rigging and things like that, though. But what we have here is that it is the first case, though, where we have a battle of ironclads and that are steam powered. Both ships were steam powered.
Mhm.
So, and it's an important distinction. You know, they were not the first ironclads, but it was the first engagement between ironclads.
Yeah. And the way that we could see how they could be actually used in battle
Mm-hmm.
and just made almost everything obsolete. Corey is just telling us the first one USA was mid
Mm-hmm.
1853 55.
Well, and the other thing is too, the Monitor, and especially in here, is everybody focuses on this too. They also had a lot of river. They even before this, I think the Monitor is what really revolutionized it, because it was all iron all around. They had timberclads. They also had other type of riverboat uh, ships that did have metal built into them, or iron built into them. So they a very good point, as Corey's pointing out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So here's a little picture here. If you're
Mm-hmm.
not familiar with these ships, this is what.
Yeah, and you notice that there's a turret here, and that was a big revolutionary with design with the Monitor itself, because before you had your cannon were out there, different portholes that they had. You had to turn, you could fire from one side of your ship, then you had to turn around for the fire with the other ship. This is the first time where we actually had a rotating turret that uh, you could fire both directions without having to turn your ship around. You know, if you get circled by a ship, you just turn your turret with it. You don't have to spin around. So, yeah, because this you're right, because it was we are celebrating the 162nd anniversary of this important battle.
Mhm.
You there, Miss Martin Muses?
Yeah, I just realized that I was accidentally muted.
I know. I was like,
You did
kind of,
great. You did great.
yeah.
I was yapping away. I was like, chime it in here. Yes, everything
Yes.
that he has just said is amazing and true. But
Yeah.
and if you've seen movies like the Pirates of the Caribbean, especially the first one,
Mm-hmm.
did a really good job. Some of those sea battles that they had
Mm-hmm.
with the Commodore, who I think is the real hero of the show, but
Mm-hmm.
Norrington, yeah, that's exactly what they would do. And they'd have these cannons and they'd all fire them. Then they'd be like, okay. And then it'd be like slow motion. They all turn around
Mm-hmm.
and then give another pass at each other.
Yeah, exactly. And like Corey said, other navies learned from the Monitor of being low to the water for open sea. You see, the Monitor was a rush job. Really, well, let's set the stage, shall we? Okay,
Mm-hmm.
let's set the stage of what leads up to March 8th and 9th of 1862. You have the outbreak of the Civil War in April of 1861. Of course, Union forces are starting to retreat back. There were only 3 forts that stayed in Union hands throughout the whole war. The Gosport Navy Yard in Portsmouth, Virginia, was a very important naval fort for the U.S. Navy, but when they determined that they could not hold the Navy Yard, they did what you usually do, which is scuttle, destroy everything else. One of the ships that they burned was the screw frigate USS Merrimack, where we get the name in the Monitor and the Merrimack. So they did take away one of the frigates, the Cumberland, which we'll hear about that later. But because the Merrimack was a wooden ship, only burned to the waterline, below the water, the hull was okay. The engines were more or less intact. It was one of the more modern ships that they had. So with the capture of the Navy Yard, the Southern forces, the Confederates took and redesigned it. Really, and then included the iron plating on it to make it more of a monster, because the Confederates had so few resources, and they were trying to, they were outnumbered from a naval standpoint, and so there's no way they could outbuild wooden ships with the others. So they looked to make it something more advantageous, hence the iron plating and. Well, what had happened is when word got out about the construction of the of the USS, the CSS. Now you got me saying it. The CSS
no.
Virginia, the CSS Virginia, the panic struck the North because McClellan was in the process of the Peninsula Campaign, which was taking forever because he was also known as the Virginia Creeper. He was so slow. So when they got word about this new weapon, the Union started. We need to counter with this. We need something to respond to this, and so they took out different bids for different type of ironclads. There were 3 different types of monitors. The one that really worked was this that we have, but like to Corey's point earlier, it was not seaworthy either. It could not go in the open seas. It was so low to the water. It looked like a raft that they did, and they rushed it also. So it was not. They got rushing product to market. So it was not the perfect ship. Even the crew members on it had to stay on top of the deck many times, and different things we have with it. Well, what happened on March, and like Corey said, also the Crimean War was when iron ships had been experimented with, which is 1853 to 1856. So those are really good points to make. The HMS Warrior was actually from Great Britain, was the world's first armor-plated iron-hulled ship. So, now we move forward to March 8 and 9. This is the maiden voyage for the CSS Virginia. It had never been out, and so it approached the Hampton Roads area, and we think that it's just cannons and all, but actually they actually also had a ramrod on this ship, which is another weapon that it had. So basically, the Virginia rammed the Cumberland below the waterline and caused her to sink very quickly, taking nearly 150 crewmen down with her. Which was one of the ships that the Union had saved. Next they turned their attention to the Congress. So the Cumberland panicked. They ran their ship aground, went to shallow water, ran aground. So the tide was going in. So the Virginia had to back off, could not finish the fight with them that day, which marked the end of day 1 of the Battle of Hampton Roads, March 8th, 1862, which then leads us to the next day of March 9th, 1862. I'll take a breath here. Sorry about that.
No, it's all right. I think it's amazing. I'm so glad that you're doing this. This is so good because you're so solid on this aspect of the Civil War. Let's see. Lady V says, "Elements, hello. I'd be terrified of anything underwater like that, even if nothing goes wrong. Brave military. Yeah. Well, you want to know some serious fear? Look at the first submarines that came out of the Civil War. Many of them did end badly. They were insane.
The Hunley, that's the one. That's the Confederate one. It actually sunk a ship, but it pretty much went down right when it happened. But like this Monitor, it ended up after the engagement. I had to check up exactly when, but not long after the battle here, it sinks off the coast of North Carolina because of bad weather.
Mm-hmm.
And
it wasn't very seaworthy. It really looks like, as we see from these pictures, something mm-hmm. cobbled together almost in like a trash can that they managed to float.
Right, but they became effective for river fighting, though. They really did. Because you didn't, lower drafts. You don't have the surf that you do in the rivers. And of course, you got two types of Navy in the Civil War, don't you? You got the blue water Navy and the brown water Navy. Have you heard those terms before?
I should, but I suck. But
Oh, it's
I
okay.
know
No,
what you
you
mean.
don't.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Tell us.
The blue water Navy is your sailing ships in the open seas. Blue water.
Mhm.
And
Oh
then the
yeah.
brown water is the color. It takes on the color of the water you've got. So, which of course, if you know the Civil War, brown water Navy was just important to the Anaconda Plan, because as we look at this battle further, you have to also understand it in the context of the blockade. I don't know if you have an image of the whole
Yeah.
country with the Anaconda
I'll bring
Plan.
that up. Yes, in
Yeah,
just a second. Let me get that. Yeah, the Anaconda Plan, and this was also in the context of the blockade
exactly.
that they were doing, and it was partly to try to run this. So let me see what I can bring this up. Going to boomer it here, and yeah, because I want to bring also another more accurate plan. Sorry, rather of the second day of battle,
Mm-hmm.
and understand this is just right off the coast. People could
Yeah,
actually see it happening. It'd be like you're minding your own business, looking out over the harbor. It's like, oh my gosh, dear, look at this.
yeah.
There's a bunch of trash cans ramming each
Oh,
other.
don't even get me started on the first battle well, we'll call it uh, Manassas, but but yeah, I mean, everybody, Congress, everybody went to picnic. All the
Oh yeah.
citizens were out there on the roads, and then when sudden, late in the afternoon, when the tide turns, you got civilians in the middle of congressmen running back among the Union troops fleeing back to Centersville, and it's like the story is one of the U.S. Congress senators, I believe, was captured behind a tree. So
Yes.
exactly.
So this one's a little bit safer because unlike what happened at Bull Run, haha, northerner here. And unlike what happened at Bull Run, you
I
have
love
a
our little spirited. I love the way
I
we're
know.
playing with
What
this
can
back and
I say?
forth.
This is how I learned them. We're having a little bit of a history lesson here. But
Absolutely.
they were on shore, so they didn't get caught up in any kind of friendly fire here. But I have this now, so let me bring this up. Here we go. There's the anaconda pan, the great
because
snake.
because if like if you take a look at it, Virginia, right there off the coast of Virginia, is where this happened, where the battle took place, and you can see the whole. This overall strategy was to strangle the South,
Mhm.
cut them off from resources. You already had the advantage on material, especially when it comes to iron, food, all kinds of stuff, natural advantages. So it became blockade running. All the different ports to to strangle them like a snake. That's the whole point. Now the threat to it was if the Confederates could, even if they had fewer ships, but they had ones that could not be sunk, could really threaten the integrity of this plan. Look at what they did to the Cumberland, where it went down almost immediately with the ram. Um,
Mhm.
they feared. I mean, and you could see the drive to build the Monitor was a direct reaction to uh, the fear of the South having an all ironclad navy. Um, as another element of notice, there's one fort, Fortress Monroe, which is up in Virginia. There are two forts down in South Florida, down at the Keys. Um, there's Fort Jackson and Fort. There's two forts down in Key. There's one in Key West. There's also Fort Jefferson and the Dry Tortugas. Mrs. and I actually visited over near Pensacola. There's actually a fort over there too. Those were the only forts that did not forts in this located in the South that did not fall to Confederate forces. But you can see how those forts played in with this Anaconda Plan. And then you take the rivers, like we were talking about the Brown River Navy. All this stuff played a part in the overall strategy, and that's why this battle is so significant. We have the first time where we have two ironclad steamships, steam-powered warships facing off at each other.
Mhm.
And the threat is, if you're trying to win a war and your strategy is to choke somebody out, and you have a direct threat against that, which you got to respond with your own. And I can look up while you talk a little bit, because there
Yeah.
was some information on the process about the monitor. I'll try to
Yeah.
find.
Okay. Oh, that'd be great. Yeah. I was telling him the technical stuff. That's his stuff. I'm more of a social history, political part of it. But what I love about the Anaconda Plan, because you can see it's not just happening, as he said, on the land. It's happening on the sea. You can see this. So running the blockade was a huge deal. And since this had the potential to run the blockade, this could put everything in jeopardy because the Confederacy, they were unable to trade overseas. So there were some European nations that might have given them aid, but this was stopping them. So you had this on the water, and here in the East, that's where a lot of the famous battles we think of happening during the Civil War for getting off in the West, because what was going on in the West with the Anaconda Plan, it went well for the Union
Mm-hmm.
practically the entire time. Eventually, at the time of Gettysburg and the siege of Vicksburg, when it fell, cutting it in two, making the snake even more constricting, and finally, until it
And look
ended
at
up being the winning.
and when that happened, you cut off Texas and Louisiana from the Eastern Theater too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Which
in
Texas
Louisiana,
was, a
Arkansas,
lot of your
all of them.
supplies, your meat from Texas, cattle. I mean, also railroads. When you cut that off, so we see the strangling happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so this was a part of it. So you said that you had some technical information
That's what
for
I'm
me?
trying to find. I had it up
Oh,
here earlier, and I'm trying to find it again.
oh, okay. All right. Well, while he's doing that, but you see, check this out. Check this out. I it and you can see what he's saying, why this is riverboat stuff going on. One big wave out on the sea would definitely take care of that.
Yeah,
If they were trying to do something. And I'm gonna, whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Let me stop
yeah. That
sharing, because
looks
I
like the
do.
Virginia there.
uh, Maybe it is.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oops.
because
But
it's interesting to look at the way the two ships were built, because the Virginia was built off, or Merrimack was built off of a frame of a frigate.
mhm,
Whereas the Monitor was a completely new uh, ship. Like they were described as a raft approaching
mhm,
them.
yeah. Cobbled together, as we said. And I've got another map from the actual battle there on the second day here, or the
Mm-hmm.
Battle of Hampton Roads. But there were many of these involved and during the actual battle. And you can also see, let me bring up a slide here. Oops, did I send the slide? I don't know if I did. So I'm boomering it here, kids.
It's okay. We're good. You're doing
Yeah,
fine. We're here with you.
yeah, I had a map that I do have a map. Let me bring it up so you can get a little bit acclimated, especially if you're not used to this area of the side off the side of Virginia, because again, it's not, here it is. God. All right, I'm going to bring this up. I'm going to share it. Share screen, present. Boom. All right, so just so you can see here on the right, here's Virginia, the Chesapeake Bay, etc. Now I'm going to go back. Oh, that's the actual battle here. And oops, what'd I do with the? Oh, there it is. Okay. So, yay, Anaconda Plan. Yay, we're going up here. We're in Virginia, and we're teeny tiny little place where all this is going down. And there we are. The Hampton Roads. Corey says the England was building more ironclads for them only after the population in England turned anti-South. Did they stop and claim for them for their Souths paid for too? Okay, I'm gonna double check that. Yes, remember, Shane Willen said in Gone with the Wind, Captain Butler's ship, it was a blockade runner, was a big deal, and he made a fortune.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there was a lot of speculators that did that, because all sorts of goods, luxury goods even, and arms, if you could run the blockade, you could charge whatever you wanted to for it. Yeah, Gone with the Wind One thing I do like about Gone with the Wind is it really is a snapshot in time twofold. It's a snapshot of the Confederacy. It's a snapshot of what happened after in the Confederacy, but it's also a snapshot of the 1930s, and I'll leave that there as well.
Well, about the construction, are you ready to talk about the?
Oh yeah, go ahead. Yes.
Okay. Because the monitor was such a unique design, right? There were actually three different types of proposals for it. Well, of course, the one that wins out is what we know of the Ericsson, who came the designer. Well, he was actually Congress had appropriated 1.5. How about this? $1.5 million to build one or more armored steamships, and they had an ironclad board actually. So to approve all of these and the designs, there were three that were really looked at, but John Ericsson's was the one that we come to know of these days. But you know what? At the beginning, they rejected his bid. He didn't even bid. You know why? Because he's banned from doing business with the federal government. Yes, and Corey said yes. Corey's right. Drakenfeld had some good videos on this too. But yeah, he was part up because there was an accident years ago on something he really wasn't even part of. And so they kind of blacklisted everybody involved. And so he didn't even bother. It took somebody else coming to him to get involved with the process. And even then, looking at the early designs, it was described as Ericsson's Folly, cheese box on a raft, things like that, really was not looking like much of it. It just had the small armored pilot house that had the two cannon that were in the turret. It really looked really nondescript and everything. The crew contained 49 officers and enlisted men. But it was interesting how close this came to not even being, except he, as I had heard it described, was that it was when he got to talking the engineering stuff is when he got into it and actually got the contract from then. And that turned. There is a museum about this. It has a full scale model of what a replica of that.
Yeah, here's a little thing I put together of some of the parts of the actual monitor. Obviously, a rendering of it.
Yep. So so basically, he got the approval, acceptance of his proposal, and then it began construction at Bushwick Inlet, modern day Greenpoint, Brooklyn. So the one thing that with this ship, though, it had to be towed down to the battlefield. It was not able to propel itself. So it was always to get from New York, where it's completed, down to Virginia, it had to be towed. And then eventually we see that again later when it sinks. They had an unsuccessful set of sea trials on 19th February. Basically, it was just engine problems, with that, which is kind of striking when you consider the failures of this on its maiden voyage to sea trials. And yet the Virginia went out on the first day. But then again, it had been an active warship, prior to that. This is something completely revolutionary what we're seeing. And the 11-inch cannon that they had on it was really, really interesting. We get into that a little bit more as we get to day 2 then.
Yeah, and of course you can go visit don't visit their shipwreck, but people have and taken photographs of it underneath. It's still down there. Okay. Well, here's here's the map, I believe, from the second day.
Well, what's interesting is that apparently the monitor's crew, and I think the same happened like with the Hunley and some of them we've seen before, which was a submarine versus an ironclad like this, but the monitor's crew were all volunteers. So it tells me too that they were like, "Oh dear God, we're not going to order somebody like this. We want to make talk about bravery to volunteer to an unknown, untested device like this.
Hunk of metal. Yep.
Yeah.
And we have an elf in the house. Hello, Lady Toriel. So yeah, so here's a battle. Here's a map of the second day Civil War battle, Hampton
Hmm.
Roads, March the 9th. The red for the Confederate States and blue for the Union. You see the USS Monitor over here at 7 a.m. and several of the Confederates been here is CSS Virginia.
And you can see in there, you can see where the Minnesota and the Monitor are over there. The first ship that was got the Virginia's attention was the Minnesota, so they were starting to shell that, but then the Monitor pulls into position to protect the Minnesota, and then we have the uh, as it's described, like I told you, as one Confederate sailor mocked it as a cheese on a raft. From what they could see, what it was. So then they had, it was really all the fighting was at close range. Also, the Virginia fired the first shot at the Monitor, which struck the Minnesota, who answered with a broadside. This battle took hours. I mean, folks, and really there was not a lot of damage because they were using generally smoothbore rounds. They didn't have armor piercing rounds like we do nowadays.
And when they would ram each other, I always imagine it being like an old fashioned medieval tournament, and they're like boom.
And the Virginia many times tried to ram the Monitor, but the Monitor was a little more elusive and got away from that because that would have been disastrous to the raft on the water because it was so much lower than what the Virginia was, and we saw what happened on the first day with the ram. So I'm trying to see how long, but it definitely took hours to do this, and you could see dents in them. Let's see.
Yeah. So the
battle
first one here is at 8:30, and then they kind of come back around and here and hit each other at 10 o'clock. And so the Union came down here, and the CSS Virginia came around here, and boom, there we go again.
And look, you still have up to 12:10 p.m. I mean, they fought for hours to really just a stalemate. So and apparently and then finally, eventually, low on they're running out of ammunition that they this Virginia has to pull out. It did suffer enough damage to require extensive repair. So don't think that they did not do damage to each other. It was just not enough to sink the other, unlike what we saw the day before with the Cumberland. But also keep in mind too, the Monitor was they had some of their officers that were blinded, so they had some chain of command issues there at the end. But then when they realized the Virginia had pulled away because the Virginia had enough damage. Also remember, and I forgot to mention this earlier, at the end of day one, near the end of day one, when they had great success, Franklin Buchanan, who was the commander of the Virginia, went up on deck they were looking to accept the surrender from the Congress, which had run aground, who had loaded its flag, but he was seriously wounded by a sharpshooter from the coast. So on day two here was not the original commander for the Confederate forces. So and then the Monitor returned, and then here back on day two, the Virginia was quitting. So then the Monitor reclaimed its position. So it did not pursue, but then again, good luck. We know how how the problems it had, engine problems. It's like, just don't sink.
So. Yes, exactly. As long as you all don't drown, it's a good day. And then that was kind of the end of it, because the Monitor was pretty much screwed after this, and it did eventually sink.
Yes, and being transported south, I think it's off Cape Hatteras, which was the graveyard of shipping always. I mean, if so many shipwrecks and ships have gone down off the Carolina coast over the years.
Yeah, and divers all like to go down there and everything. I do have a photograph that I'm going to try to get up here of the way it looks like at the bottom of the sea. But while we're doing that,
Hmm.
Whenever I lecture, I always tell the students and the people, who, what, when, where, how, why, and the why is it important? So, why is this relatively insignificant battle? Why do we remember this? Why, frankly, did the whole world pay attention to this?
There are many advancements that came out of this too.
Hmm.
And that's one of the biggest things is it got everybody's attention. Like Corey had said, Britain was making some for the Southerners. Then they realized, we need this. It was one of those revolutionary breakthroughs when you see, because the damage that an ironclad ship did to a ship that, the old style frigates, the old wooden ships, how fast that they could sink them. I mean, heck, one of the old pirating things you do is they even use it some in the Civil War was, light a cannonball on fire, shoot it into the wooden ships, start fires and stuff like that. Now you have more defensive, armaments, to withstand the enemy's firepower. And from things that I've read in other sources too, this made the world take notice, and they quit building the wooden uh, uh, naval ships. Now they went truly to the move was to armor of everything and steam power.
Hmm. Yeah, and you have the British Navy that ruled the seven seas, looking on and going, as you said, "Oh man,
Hmm.
we're behind." It was
Right,
the space race for the 1870s.
right, exactly. And the more iron clad ships you have, the more the powerful your navy. You we could, like I said, you could see how fast in that one battle, that one day, and you could see the fear in the Union reaction why they rushed to build their own um, type of ironclad ship. Now, they did have, and I think it's earlier that they did have some iron protected ships even before this existed. We talked about that. We saw that in the Crimea War, with both the French and the British had some uses of it, but this one is the first time that we actually had a real engagement between two steam powered iron clad ships. Yes. At the time, there was smoothbore and rifle, both front and back load guns, sometimes the same ship. Yes. But that also, Corey points out here about the difference smoothbore rifled. I've mentioned before at Fort Pulaski. That is
Hmm.
viewed as the advent of the first time of the wide scale usage of rifled artillery. If you're familiar with Savannah and Tybee Island, where the fort is, it's about a mile and a half away. They were pounding that fort accurately with those rifled artillery. It forced normally you would have a siege warfare with that, but they breached the Confederate fort wall within hours and exposed the powder magazine. Which, if you saw what we did at our fort over in Pensacola, where the cigarette made of exposed a bastion. Well, you don't want your powder magazines, so they forced a Confederate surrender at Fort Pulaski very quickly, and that was viewed as the obsolescence of the brick and masonry fort. So, and then the world took notice with a lot of these advances during the American Civil War.
Yeah, it made the world's navy obsolete. Yeah, that
Yep.
too. And it's said invented strategies. It's like already the whole let's all be like a medieval jousting tournament that was gone. That was done. Now we have the turret. Now we have
Mm-hmm.
all
The
sorts
turret.
of other
Mm-hmm.
other things. I like when you said they spent 1.5 million. That's a crud ton of money for back then. I don't know what the equivalent is, but that's almost like $1 billion, isn't it? But for back then, I mean, $1 million was an astronomical amount of money.
I wonder what the conversion would be on that. So,
Yeah.
and and look at other things, because one of the best sites I like to use is battlefields.org,
Mhm.
and they actually had, if you don't mind me citing them real quick,
No, no, go
they
right ahead.
they actually had 10 facts from this battle that they said from Hampton Roads. One is that the CSS Virginia and U.S. Monitor were not the first ironclad warships, but they were the first ironclads to battle one another, and
Mhm.
we talked about that tonight. Um, because we had other cases, with other countries that had ironclad ships. Their second fact is the Confederacy, which had great difficulty in sourcing the iron plating needed for the Virginia, which we all are aware of. The struggle for resources from the Southern standpoint. The first trial run of the Virginia was its combat debut against the U.S. Navy at Hampton Roads on March 8, 1962. Fact number 4 that they said, the March 8, 1862 battle between the Virginia and the wooden U.S. naval vessels was the worst defeat in the history of the United States Navy until Pearl Harbor.
Whoa.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Because the attack on the Cumberland killed 121 out of 376 on board, and the attack on the Congress killed 27% of its crew, 120 out of 434. The Virginia, on the other hand, suffered just 2 killed and a dozen wounded in its fight with the Union Navy. And of course, this is battlefields.org is where this is coming from.
Yes. Oh no, go ahead and cite. Yeah, I believe in citing sources. I'm a historian, so please do. I always say you can study this till the cows come home. You can't ever know anything.
Actually, since I'm a mod, let me see. I'll put the link in the chat if you don't mind.
Oh, but sure, go ahead. But everyone stay watching us, though. But watch this afterwards. Go
exactly.
Afterwards.
Yeah, it's always important, especially to cite your sources, because some of these I kind of knew about, but some of these I did not know about. And in the course of this discussion, I mean, to be fair with it, I think these are valid, great points that they brought out. Very interesting things to think about. And fact number 5, despite carrying 12 large caliber guns, one of the Virginia's most lethal weapons was a simple 1,500-pound iron ram projecting from its bow. Mm-hmm. So we saw what it did. And actually, you remember, what happened with Hundley was it had kind of a charge in front of it, but when it blew up, when it did its attack, it ended up ripping off and ended up sinking the Hundley. This one, the ram stayed on the ship, because in the day 2, they did seek to employ the ram against the Monitor, but they were not able to do that. So fact number 6, the Virginia commander I mentioned earlier, Franklin Buchanan, was wounded by a musket ball, did not participate in the duel with the USS Monitor. Oh my gosh, really? That's the conversion?
Yeah, that's what he says. Yeah, I told you it was probably pretty big. Well, thank you. I always say, everyone Google. Thank you for the information. My gosh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love that whole idea, though, that what you're saying about poor bastards, not only did they have to worry about the ramming and all these ships, they were being sniped at.
Yep. Exactly. I mean, they went up to take a surrender, and that happened so many times. You didn't want to expose your officers, and just so many cases where the officers get killed because of just looking. I mean, Albert Sidney Johnston at Shiloh, he went to rally his troops as they were struggling, so he rallied, reformed them to go forward towards the peach orchard, took a shot through the kneecap. Well, he apparently had numbness in his extremities, so he never knew that he was wounded and bled to death.
Yeah. Bled out. And Reynolds, that in Gettysburg.
Yep, snipers. Exactly. Another thing that they mentioned is fact number 7, is sensing that shells could do little damage, even at close range. The Virginia ceased firing on the Monitor during the battle. So, there's the armor plating. Now, this is one that I really did not know about, and it's important of sourcing here, I think. Because in fact number 8, they said, if the Monitor had used larger gunpowder charges in its 11-inch guns, it's likely that it would have holed and sunk the Virginia, which I find fascinating. The Monitor had been hurried down. They had carried 2 12-inch Dahlgren naval guns. But the Monitor, they were designed to carry that, but they had 2 smaller 11-inch Dahlgrens within the armored rotating turret. So what the article says is, to prevent any catastrophic gun bursting within the confined turret, each of the guns was restricted to using a 15-pound gunpowder charges. So even with this lower charge, it did a lot to dent and disfigure the armor plating. But they said that if later tests conducted after the battle showed that the Monitor had used 25 or 30-pound gunpowder charges, its 11-inch guns could have punctured the Virginia's hull with relative ease at close ranges, and that's the Virginia right there.
Yeah.
Because see what had happened, the Virginia's running out of ammo, so it's lightening its load, so it's raising up out of the sea, and you can see that the iron plating really went down to the water line. But as it rides higher in the water, you start to expose the part that's not reinforced. So
yeah.
So, and then which leads to fact number 9 that they said is, unlike the Monitor, whose belt of armor descended well below the waterline, Virginia's iron plating extended to barely the waterline when fully loaded. With each broadside, the Virginia would expend 350 pounds of ordnance. So after 2 hours of firing on the Monitor and nearby ships, they had lightened the load by 5 tons. So ironically, as the ship became lighter, it became more vulnerable. As the ship lightened, its unarmored sides below the iron casemate were visible above water. It could have been easily punctured. And number 10 is that Franklin Buchanan and John L. Warden, who commanded the Monitor, but became superintendents of the United States Naval Academy in Annapolis. So,
yeah, well, there you go. Yeah.
So definitely check out that site. If you love history, that's one of the best this is one of my go-tos, especially when I do battlefield tours or when I'm doing research on stuff. And I believe they have it's the American Battlefield Trust is actually what they call it. And they do have a YouTube channel and stuff to follow them and all. I would encourage you to follow them too.
Yeah. I wish I could find a really good picture of the Monitor. Or I think I have the Monitor. Well, it's a drawing, but as far as a photograph, I think that's my thumbnail is actually.
Yeah. I think really I don't know how many pictures of the Monitor itself really exist. You got to be, there are a few that are out there. Most of what we see are the sketches and stuff. But
yeah, here I go.
In terms of full ship.
Yeah. Well, because it didn't stick around. Yeah, and of course, Corey Cochran is talking about the machine gun. Yes, the Gatling gun and the Gardner gun and the repeating shooter. That was and for the most part, they weren't really used by soldiers too much in the Civil War. Most of them used the old-fashioned, where it takes how many steps is it? 9 steps, 11 steps?
9 steps.
9 steps. I was right. I was right the first time to load a gun once you've done a shot, and it's just nerve-wracking.
We were doing a stream one day, and we were at Fort McAllister, which is an earthen fort. I call it the Shire because it has all the big hobbit holes where it was an earthen fort and stuff. And they had a volunteer that day that did a live. We were streaming live in the battlefield at the fort, and he did live on YouTube for us. I need to go clip that out and bring that back. But yeah, he did the whole drill step by step, explained it all through the whole process. It was really, really cool to see.
Oh, do it. I mean, that would be a huge video for you because we need to get you watch hours, right? Aren't you needing some watch hours?
Oh, right no, I'm good with watch hours. I'm good without watch hours. I'm good with that. I just, but hey, I just like talking to people and having a good time and sharing information.
For sure. Wait, but so are you mostly monetized? Did you go ahead and get the 500?
I'm at 500. There are other reasons I can tell you off air. I'm keeping this as a hobby for now. So it's not about the monetization. It's about hanging out with great people, coming on a great show like with you, Teresa, and stuff like this right now for me. And Corey, about the Gatling gun and stuff like that. We had mostly muskets at the first. Then we started having the carbines. And introduce your cavalry and stuff. But one of the first uses of the repeated rifle or something like the Gatling gun was at Chickamauga, and I believe it was an Indiana unit used it until they ran out of ammo and had to pull back. So yeah, it did make a huge difference with the developments in this war.
Yep. There you go. Okay, this is a photo, but of the Monitor, but it's not the full. Oh my gosh, my cats are fighting. Not fighting. One of them likes to block the other one, just because he likes to be a jerk. Yeah. So this is the top part of the Monitor, and you see the soldiers there, the sailors rather.
Look at the picture though. Look at the bottom left on the conning tower. Now I'd be curious to see when this picture was taken. If it was done between battles, because that looked like some huge dents in it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, let me look in because find the source. It's one of them. I have here is a drawing. So drawings don't count, but yes, that would be accurate. It looks like it did take a bit of a ram, didn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, need to do better with my source there. Great. Now the girl cat's running to my lap, like, "Mama,
It's
Mama, help
okay.
me."
It's like having kids and streaming, it's everybody's patient. Cats, tell you what, cats love attention on streams. They're quiet
Mm-hmm.
all day until the streams happen, and then then they want to. But you know what? We think of monitor, we just think of this particular ship,
Mm-hmm.
But there's so many different versions of ironclads and stuff, like Corey had mentioned, timberclads. I mean, we see cases of the ships, they just put iron on it like they did the Virginia, those type of things. But monitor was actually the name of a it became a type of uh, armed ship, not just the ship itself, because the U.S. Navy used monitors, what they called monitors, up until through World War One.
Mm-hmm.
They look different though.
Yeah. So it's almost like what we say when we say Kleenex for a tissue for blowing our nose. It
Mm-hmm.
became a brand name.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. There's some like there's a HMS Airbus in World War II, which is a Royal Navy monitor. Uh, and even some of the articles say that U.S. during Vietnam reintroduced the use of what they called monitors, river monitors,
Mm-hmm.
because they were able to go up and down the rivers and you know be able to I think really with deterrent. So you've got, we come to know the monitor as this one particular ship, but it takes a life of its own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And to what you've been saying about go to see battlefields if you can. Obviously, you cannot literally visit where this happened, but there
Mhm.
are museums around these areas, and you'll get the living historians that you'll find there and the tour guides. They really know their stuff.
They do. They do. Although we say them, we kind of had the disgruntled one at Shiloh one time, but he was cool. I think he was just being blunt honest with us though, because he didn't get the full time job there,
Ah,
but he was like he kind of leveled with us. He brought us some things, the questioning thing with history. That's the one thing with history is you've got to be careful with. My oldest kid is history in doctoral school now with history and thing.
mm-hmm.
One of the biggest challenges is, how dare that I have it. How dare you challenge that? Because this is what we heard forever and ever and ever. And like, is a lot of what we had is sometimes maybe not from good sources.
Yeah.
Sometimes things have been folklore and stuff handed down. Like one of the things at Shiloh, and it was hard to question it, the peach orchard.
Mm-hmm.
If you watch the Ken Burns documentary, the dramatic music about the bodies with the peach orchard falling down there and all that, and it was like we were there at the time of the battle in early April.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't even close to growing peach orchards, peach blossoms.
Yeah.
It wasn't even close. And it was like he's like, "Do you see peach blossoms?" Yeah, no, nope.
Yeah.
Of course, Bloody Pond. You also wonder, can water really turn that red? There, you don't know. We were not there, but sometimes stuff like this happens. Especially over there. Hey, I have a historical site. Start early, create a myth. It becomes a legend.
Yeah.
It takes a life of its own.
I can tell you that having studied medieval history, it's a nightmare trying to find reliable sources because it was perfectly acceptable to make up legends about
Mm-hmm,
things. And you're like, oh, so you have to look at all different kinds of sources. Then you have to look, is it a biased source? Is it sometimes American Civil War is biased on both sides,
mm-hmm.
but one version is taught one way and one's taught another way, and the truth is quite there in the middle. So we have to look around with the sources, and then you have to examine. Well, okay, then maybe when they were talking about the peach blossoms, was it metaphorical? Were they trying to get something across? It's just all sorts of
Mm-hmm.
interesting things about checking your sources and citing your sources. public service announcement. I'm getting really sick of people. I pointed the finger of judgment. You'll see this
Uh-oh.
on Twitter. People will post like pictures or quotes, like so and so said this. And then everyone's like losing their crap and all that. And I just look at it and I go, can you give me the source for that?
Mm-hmm.
A
Yeah.
lot of times it's just stuff people make up to get engagement on their timelines. So be careful out there, kids. Everyone gives a source.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never put out a quote that I don't have the source to. But you know what I'm saying? Those like screenshots that you'll see. Be
Mm-hmm.
careful, people. Sometimes it's because they don't want to give clicks, but sometimes it's they've got another agenda. Always look for the source. Now, I am going to say I'm a little bit ashamed of myself because someone did that, and I was just like, "Are you gonna give the source?" And he goes, "Oh, okay, sure." And he gave me the source. I'm like, "Oh, okay." So sometimes they do have the source, but
Exactly.
look for the source,
But
and then
see,
look if
you
it's a
also
reliable source.
some of the things that I've been looking and listening to sometimes is bringing up, even with history, is that even firsthand sources may not be trustworthy or accurate. They may
Mhm.
have bad recollections. I know some of the stuff I watched in World War II. Many times, especially around the Battle of Midway, a lot of the reports came back, well, we sank ships or we blew them. And then, like, we know looking back now, no, y'all didn't do anything. So first person accounts can also,
Yet
and it's not
and sometimes
necessarily
it can be as
intentional. It's not
yeah,
necessarily intentional. It's just that they in the moment think something happened, but they come back with this and that's the information they share. But it can't be verified, or turned out it's not verifiable or didn't happen.
yeah, and that's the other thing, even if as a first person thing, because you could be mistaken, you could be maybe you got hit on the head. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
It could be several reasons, or it could be nefarious. People deliberately do change facts for an agenda. So
Yeah.
always look at it. I mean, that's why I kind of like diaries from the Civil War era because there's so many diaries. They usually are pretty reliable, and if not factual, but they give you a sense of what the people involved were thinking. What was their mindset? What do they remember? What was important to them as they were going through this? And if by their limited information, maybe that informed why they made decisions that they did. We have the benefit of hindsight. It's like, well, didn't they know that eventually, for example, the whole blockade was going to do this, that, and this? It's like maybe they knew, maybe they didn't. It they
Mm-hmm.
didn't have the God's eye that we have.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like Sam Watkins is one of the most famous. He served as a foot soldier in the Tennessee Infantry. In the Army of Tennessee. He's got one of the most famous writings throughout the war. Those you might have to give a little more credibility to. But in source documents, I'm learning stuff about Battle of Midway and stuff, watching some different historians and stuff, and source documents are important because what finding out now. There's one book I'll talk to you after you might find fascinating. They're actually interpretation. My oldest kid and I've had that discussion, especially like with World War II. There's not enough people interpreting stuff in foreign languages. Like a lot of our understanding of things of the Pacific War, Battle of Midway, and all, it's just based on what we've had for 50 years, based on Western sources. Have we ever looked into the Japanese sources in those original languages? You know, from a bigger scope, there's another side, and they can be biased too.
Mhm.
I've seen some examples of that too. It's not just one side is everything, but like you said, also don't say anything or share anything unless you know it independently to be true. I know one
Correct.
talk show host said years ago, he said, "Don't even believe me unless you know it to be true or can confirm it yourself." And
Precisely.
yeah.
And it's my crusade because I've noticed since X has been monetized, so they people can get in revenue, ad revenue for the amount of clicks and engagement. It's just gotten out of control. Just don't be fooled. That's just
Hmm.
all I say. But, we do need to be, if not professional, but amateur historians or amateur journalists. If
Mhm.
because you've got to, even if you agree with the conclusion, if it's not based on good data, then the conclusion is false.
Garbage in, garbage out, you know?
Hmm. Well, as we're coming to the end of this hour, is there anything else on the ironclad? That you call it the Battle of Hampton Roads, I Monitor versus Merrimack. What would you like to share?
Oh, in terms of the battle, I think we covered it pretty much. I mean, there really was just, in terms of an actual practical output, there really wasn't a lot with it. It's just a stalemate. But when it get the battle between the two ironclads, but we could see day one definitely had a huge impact for what the Virginia could have done against just regular wooden shipping. Um, but then again, you don't have enough of those ships, to counter it. We also see more in the riverboats, the timberclads and stuff like that. So, mm, but what is really big with this is the biggest point though is what it did as a turning point for history is that we have the first time that two steam powered ironclad ships actually fought against each other in a battle and and it just I think illustrates how much the world was changing during this time. I took a humanities course in college. They called it the Age of Revolution. Well, this was during this time period as part of that time, and really the whole world was changing. It was a revolution. Science was changing, our industry was changing, war we see was changing. Just so much and so many advancements, and there's and don't dismiss history. There's so much that we can learn from history going forward. I mean, every step of the path is, we move forward and we advance. So,
Mhm.
so I think that's about the last thing with this one. Although the only other thing is, dang, we could have a 24-hour history stream one night. I think I'm just, but I'm excited. History can be fun.
Yeah.
We can have fun with history. It is very exciting in a lot of ways, and have passion with it. And so I think that's about it that I've got for tonight.
Yeah. Well, no, that's great. And for those of you that maybe this is the first time you're hearing about this or hearing about it in more details, please go ahead and look it up. It
Um,
is fascinating
it,
as can be.
yeah, and everybody gets, well, not everybody, but a lot of times the biggest frustration is that people dismiss history. Like, oh, it's all names, dates, and this, that, and the other, like boring recitation of facts. Well, I don't agree with that. That's
No.
not what it should be. We see the article had 10 facts. Well, those are not just reciting dates and names and stuff. There's stuff that we learned out of it, and it can be exciting and vibrant in some ways. And now, like I say, there's some things now as history goes, don't don't this is again with my oldest kid who challenged me a little bit. I'm learning as I'm getting older, seeing other historians say stuff. What we have been told for 50, 100 years may not necessarily be all the truth as we're doing more research and as we're getting into more records,
Hmm.
you know, which I find fascinating part of history. Where is it? It's kind of like that X Files. The truth is out there somewhere. Well, what's the truth? Getting there, having the debates, having a discussion like this tonight really makes it fun. So
Yeah. And Corey saying, saying something else, the hearing loss of the
I
cruise. They don't even get a look at. Oh gosh, yes.
he spoke on one of the videos that I watched, and it may have been on the Drakenfeld that he talked about. I know that I saw somebody make a comment that they had a relative, just on the Minnesota, which was the one that took the shot the first day, the second day, that their descendant got mustered out soon after because of hearing loss. So yeah,
Hmm.
they're confined to these small areas. Yeah,
And echoing, yeah, and all this sound of you're in one of those and the echo. Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, it's
great
crazy.
points, Corey. Great points, Corey.
Yeah. No, and it's fascinating. Well, one thing as an anthropologist, you'll find you're minding your own business, everything is quote unquote settled. Then some dude finds a skull somewhere and everything changes. That's the same thing happens in history. So uh, it's very vibrant. It's very exciting, and I was so glad that we were once again able to discuss this. I like doing things on the anniversaries. So this, when I saw that the anniversary was coming up, I was like, okay, we got to
Oh,
do this. This is going to be fun. So
well, we got
thank
plenty
you.
of anniversaries coming up too,
Oh yeah, I
Tracy.
know. Because when summer comes around, we've got Shiloh, we've got Chancellorsville. I've already done Gettysburg, but
Did you
I,
ever
you
see my Battles of the Civil War map?
um one
I'll
that
have to
you've
say
made or
the missus and her sisters made when we were at Fort Jackson,
oh my goodness.
Fort Pickens in Pensacola last year. Yeah, I'll try to get a good picture and send it to you because what
Okay.
it does, it's one of my backgrounds that I use. It shows you the whole map, and it has a timeline of all the battles at the bottom, but it
Mhm.
also highlights a lot of the battles and troop movements throughout the war. Really fascinating.
Okay. Well, great. Yeah, I look forward to seeing that. And thank you, Shane and Corey and everyone that's been popping in and out and will be listening
Yes.
on the replay. Let me know what you think, Lady V. We've had Lady T, Jacob Ironside popped in. We had Zach's pop in and say hi.
Hmm.
Also, let's see if I miss anyone. Please, it's not intentional. Sometimes it all jumps forward and it's hard to go back and find them. Now, Dadmanwalking55, where can we find you?
At Dadmanwalking55
Yeah,
on Twitch, YouTube, and Twitter. Now,
yeah.
I do have to say, if it doesn't have a G, it ain't me, because there is a fake thing out there with this avatar that does not have the G in it. So
Mm.
as long as it's Dadman, I mean, I'm like, why bother me? But anyway, Dadman Walking 55. Find me on Twitch, YouTube, and Twitter. And especially, I tell everybody, make sure you get the notifications. But I definitely put out whenever I go live on Twitter,
Mm.
and that's a good way to do that. And I tell you what, Twitter's a good thing, at least for, even if you can just not check it often. It's a great way to communicate for gaming and all kinds of other stuff. Oh,
Yep.
crocheting! I
Yeah,
tell
I was gonna say I'm a big crocheter. That's awesome.
Oh my gosh! I tell you what, I want to have a crocheting stream.
Oh, okay. You
I
crochet?
think no, I don't, but I like doing things. See, the missus, I could bring her in. There's another person that wants to learn how to use StreamYard. Got Lady V, got you. I mean, because I like doing things that I don't know about. I like learning
Oh,
new things. I've had somebody on talking gardening. I mean, I've talked to comics and stuff, and I can't draw worth the darn. It's one thing that I've really liked enjoying with my chill chats and stuff is talking to people and seeing people from different backgrounds that do different things. Because I like learning new things, and that's
no.
awesome.
No, that's fine. I was just gonna say, not that there's anything wrong with crocheting, because obviously that's something I do really big. I was like, oh my gosh, you crochet too, but that's all right. Well, stay tuned for all of that, and you can find me here at Miss Martin Muses, where I talk about what makes me laugh, makes me cry, makes me happy, makes me sad, or just really ticks me off. I have some streams upcoming. We have the oh my gosh, what is
I
it?
love it when you sing like you do. Like you started talking and it's like great.
Yeah. Well, it's a high pitch. It happens naturally. Tuesday night, we're going to talk about Boromir in the books only, because often because the Peter Jackson movies were so good, we allow it to blur a little bit and maybe miss out a little bit of the nuance of what
Can,
Tolkien was doing with his character.
can I
So
ask you
me,
one? Can I ask you one quick question? I know we need to wrap up.
oh well, sure,
Since I'm with you here, I mentioned the other day I got to see the Lord of the Rings extended cuts three back to back to back in the theaters a couple weeks ago.
yeah,
That was so awesome. And I
yeah.
tell you what, if you ever get a chance to do it, try it.
Oh, I might. We'll see. It sounds like one heck of a marathon. It would definitely be worth it. Alas for Boromir, yes.
Plus, you
Uh,
can see Boromir on the big screen again. Hey,
oh, of course. Well, I did see the Return of the King. I just didn't watch all three at the same time. Now, yeah. So we're going to talk more in the books with High King Feanor, and then we're going to have Catholic Explaining Lent with Magitech Megs. I probably am going to do what's the difference between a narcissist and a sociopath, because a lot of people have asked that question in the streams, and I'm like, well, maybe I'll just do a stream about that. So stay tuned. Also, a lot of content. I will be talking A Song of Ice and Fire. We're going to be doing Fire and Blood with Sporking on his channel this Monday night. So if that's your cup of tea, or if you maybe are a fan of House of the Dragon and you want to read the book and what's all behind it, please go ahead and tune in. If you don't want to be spoiled from House of the Dragon, this will be a good one to watch, because we're not going to get up to the Dance of Dragons. We're just going to do some background with Aegon the Conqueror. So please go ahead and do that, and please subscribe and keep sharing things out. I am getting really close. I think I need currently about 200 watch hours, and then I will be fully monetized. Then I won't bother you anymore about subs or watch hours. But
Watch
once I get
hours.
that milestone,
Hey, I just contact me anytime. I'll jump on with you anytime. We'll come up with we'll get those watch hours jacked up for you.
well, thank you, and or just watch my stuff too.
Yes.
That'll work.
Well, I'm known
well.
to go live at 2:00 in the morning when somebody says they want to go live. So,
Oh dear, that's crazy. All right, well, have a great day, everyone. Have a great day, and be certain to learn more about the Civil War, especially the Ironclads.
Yeah.